from the special theory of relativity that mass and energy are but different manifestations of the same thing, a somewhat unfamiliar conception for the average mind. Furthermore, the equation E is equal mc squared, in which energy is thought equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy, and vice versa. The mass and energy were in fact equivalent, according to the formula mentioned above. This was demonstrated by Cockcroft and Walton in 1932 experimentally.
I mean, at this time, this man was viewed to be a hero of the highest order and a thinker unparalleled in human history. Now, Einstein has somewhat vanished from our public consciousness in significance as compared as what he was when I was young. But this is a man who was not born in this country. And this is a man who was born again in Germany. And I think we have to look at all the scholars and political figures that came to this country either fleeing the Soviet Union or fleeing the Germans or fleeing the crown. Life was not good in Europe. And people were in rebellion there. There was so much in rebellion that the strongest of them, or the ones that had the vision to do so, left the continent. You have to think about how bad things are that you're going to leave behind your family and your friends in pursuit of a better life. That is a failure of the place within which you're living. It's a breakdown of society. Now, I'm not saying a few people don't move here and there, but when there's a mass migration, which has been going on really for hundreds of years, people have been moving around trying to reshuffle, either because they were pushed out of their homeland through a war of genocide, or because they sought a better life. Well, what kind of better life were they seeking? Many of these people that we're talking about left because had they stayed, if this man would have stayed in Germany, he'd have been a slave or he'd have been killed. So let's think about how this worked. These great scholars, and they were great scholars of their time, they were offered huge money to come to the United States because our institutions of higher learning actually lagged behind the European institutions of higher learning. Our institutions were newer, our country was newer, our academic traditions were newer, and actually we only picked up, this is very critical, as a country we only picked up what's called progressive education at about the turn of the 20th century. Previous to that time, education was religious. The focus of the country's education was a religious education. That education was concomitantly taught in the schools and in the churches. So people were brought up with a very spiritual worldview as compared with what happened after the beginning of the progressive era. And it took many generations. So our higher institutions, because they were religious in their intention at start and only became progressive, maybe 1870s, 80s, 90s, 1900s, they started looking to poach the talent out of these European institutions. And lo and behold, many of these people were religious refugees themselves or cultural refugees themselves. They were running from the Soviet Union. They were running from the Nazis. They were running from the crown. These people had to boogie the hell out of Dodge. And they got warm and cushy jobs at our most fantastic institutions of higher learning. and they got funded to do research, and they were rock stars because this was the dawn of the technique, not of science and the scientific method, but the application of science in everyday life in such a way that people's lives became easier. And this is how people got suckered into materialism, because there was an easing of the burden, but people moved off the farm, came into the cities to participate in the industrial age. We've progressively become broken away from the land. We are no longer capable of surviving without the state. Previous to this evolution, so-called, could have been a devolution. This is why it's an experiment in consciousness. We're experimenting. What is the maximum, what is the most appropriate organization of society to enhance human well-being? That's the only question our leaders need to be asking themselves. That's the only question that we, the people, need to be asking ourselves. And we need to answer this question, I think, my opinion, in a way that's novel and better than the answer that we've had, because we're in the culmination of a long period of an experiment, and it's very evident to me that we're losing our freedom. And when we lose our freedom, we lose our connection to spirit, we will lose our connection to well-being. So anything that degrades human well-being, we got to think it through critically, talk about it. We don't have to move quickly. We've got plenty of time.